Alright guys, so a couple of days ago over in the UK, they held their national elections, and after 14 some odd years of failed Conservative leadership under people like David Cameron and Theresa May and Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss, who famously couldn't even outlast a head of lettuce, and then most recently Rishi Sunak, the Conservatives have effectively been wiped out. Right, at least from the position that they were in. Now, I got a couple things that I want to show you guys here. We're going to watch through a little bit of this Jeremy Corbyn interview over on Channel 4 because he just recently won his election, and I believe it's called Islington North. And he had to run as an independent candidate because the Labour Party effectively blocked him from running as a Labour candidate, right? And this comes years after he was pushed out of the party under what I think are pretty bullshit accusations of anti-Semitism. So we're going to watch him in this, but just a little bit of context in terms of what this election actually looked like. Here from the BBC, the general election results of 2024. So we got here the vote share, so the percentage that they earned, and you have to also keep in mind that this was a record low turnout. In fact, it's a 20-year record low turnout in terms of the amount of people who showed up to the polls. But in terms of the vote share, the Labour Party got 34%, which actually isn't that much given how unpopular the Tories were. Now, the Conservatives got 24%. Reform UK, which is basically like the UK fascist party, got 14%. The Liberal Democrats got 12%, and the Green parties got 7%. Now, if you compare that to the seats share, again, this looked like, if you just look at the seats and how they were allocated, it looked like it was a complete bloodbath in favor of the Labour Party and against the Conservatives. But again, do this cross comparison between the seat share versus the vote share, and I think one way it was described was basically this was like an overwhelming victory in terms of the seats, but not necessarily in terms of the vote share, right? And so you can see here, Labour gets 63% of the seats, Conservatives ended up with 19% of the seats, and then the Liberal Democrats got 11%. Now, in terms of how each of these different factions went up or down in this election cycle, you can see here there were some pretty significant gains from the Greens. They went up from 2019 3% to now up to close to 7%. The Labour Party actually didn't really make that much of a significant gain here in terms of the vote share. They went up from about 32% to 34%. Again, you have the Liberal Democrats there, pretty close to, staying even. The massive plunge from the Conservatives, and then again, the fascists skyrocketing as well. Now, we also had this, again, historic, low turnout, and also the comparison directly with Jeremy Corbyn. Starmer's landslide victory saw Labour get fewer votes than Corbyn's worst result ever when he was leading the Labour Party, right? So again, we're going to jump into this. Basically, it looks like they won by default, effectively, because everybody hated the Tories so much, right? So this wasn't some massive vindication of, Starmer's sort of more like neoliberal, centrist, right-wing sort of platform or anything like that. It was basically just a comparison point. Now, let's go ahead and jump into this Jeremy Corbyn, where he is absolutely going to eviscerate everybody who tries to come at him on this panel here.
Actually, Keir Starmer.
It's a fantastic win we've achieved here tonight in Islington North. It's a popular win where people have come forward to support an inclusive democratic campaign. It's a people-powered campaign, and I'm very, very proud of our result. Obviously, as a Labour government elected, congratulations on that. I will be an independent MP. That's what I'm elected as. And I will be there holding that government to account on issues of child poverty, of mental health, and of global peace and environmental demands. And that is what the people of Islington North have asked me to do. But it's also a very strong message that if you tread on democracy within your own party, it has consequences. And so tonight, the people of Islington North have spoken and elected me with 24,000 votes.
But isn't the message, in fact, that when you take the Labour Party to the centre, it wins a landslide? And if that means, you're on the edges of it, sometimes supporting it, sometimes criticising it, well, so be it.
It's a landslide, yes, in seats, but it is a lower vote than has been achieved in many previous elections. It's only 37% of the national poll, and our political system exaggerates parliamentary majorities because of first-past-the-post system. Now, maybe that's a debate for another day. But
I mean, that's a good point, and it's also basically the same thing here in the United States, like with our electoral college system. If you are a Democrat, let's say, in Mississippi or in Alabama or some, very solidified conservative state, then your vote for president effectively doesn't matter. You should always still vote because the down ballot races can be close and you can win some of those. But in terms of like your senators and the presidential vote, there are basically like a handful of swing states, like less than 10 out of 50 of our states here that really actually decide the presidency. And so, to criticize the first past the post, voting system, I think is 100% true for the United States as well as the UK as well. But, he continues here.
It comes with it a huge responsibility. We live in a country which is dominated by the power of billionaires and the poverty of millions. I think we need to change that. And I'm not convinced that the Labour manifesto's economic offer will be able to deliver the fundamental changes our society needs. So I'll be a voice to try and bring about greater equality and opportunity for everyone in our society, particularly young people.
Let us just bring in a couple of the people around our table. We have Harriet Harman.
I'm genuinely so excited for this, right? Because you have him, winning this seat, he's going to be able to just be a relentless thorn in the side of Starmer as he takes this position at 10 Downing Street, right? This is absolutely phenomenal. And you also saw those gains from the Greens as well. So I guess the hope is, like, sure, Keir Starmer is sort of just like a, neoliberal shill, but maybe because you have guys like Corbyn, because you have some other Greens and some other more left-wing candidates, that maybe they could actually have a substantial voice and potential sway in pushing him away from this neoliberal austerity agenda that he's intent on pushing forward with. But he continues.
And Alistair Campbell, and I'm sure they're both keen to talk to you. Harriet.
Well, I think you make the changes that Jeremy says that he espouses by having Labour as the party in government, not by having somebody standing against the party as a maverick on the backbenches. And I think, we've always stood for in the party collective endeavour. Sometimes things go our way, sometimes they don't, but collective endeavour on behalf of the people of the country as a whole. And what Jeremy Corbyn has done is stood out just as an individual and put himself as an individual above social progress for the country as a whole. And I just don't agree with that.
That's just amazing, right? I mean, her argument is basically that the change doesn't come from, as Jeremy Corbyn was pointing out there, like materially improving the lives of average working class people in the UK. The change comes from just having a different face as your leader, or just having the Labour Party in power in general. That's what you view change as in the country. I mean, it's just amazing. And also, where was this whole solidarity attitude when it was Corbyn in leadership? Because I don't remember there being like some sort of blanket Labour support unified behind Jeremy Corbyn, if I have my history correct there.
I would never do that, put my own interests above the party and the good the party can do the country. So I'm disappointed in you, Jeremy, but I expect that's nothing new.
Well, thank you for what you've just said there. The people of Islington North simply voted for me because we put forward a positive, inclusive campaign, because we offered hope of real change, and also we stood up for democracy within our society when the Labour Party's machinery was destroying democracy in Islington North.
Jeremy, it's Alistair here. Would you hope that one day, like me, having been expelled from the Labour Party, that you'd get back into it?
Listen, Alistair, we've just had an election. I've been elected as an independent MP. I am very much part of the wider Labour movement. I've been a trade unionist all my life, and I'll be a trade unionist to the day I die. And I will obviously be campaigning and working with people both inside and outside the Labour Party. But I've been elected as an independent, and that's the mandate I've been given.
Jeremy, it's Rory coming in here. Are you worried that Labour's going to come in with a kind of mini austerity? They're signing up to £18 billion worth of spending cuts. They're ruling out any additional borrowing. They're ruling out tax rises. How are they going to be able to invest in public services and get the country going again if they're running on an austerity package?
I think you've taken us straight to the kernel of the problem. If the Labour manifesto doesn't offer any substantial changes either in taxation or in redistribution of wealth within our society, then how on earth can you bring about the social changes that are needed? Or are you going to go down the road of further wage freezes on top of the 20% cut in the living standards of the poorest people over the past 15 years? People voted for change and they expect to get it. So I would imagine there's going to have to be some serious heart searching about the economic direction in which this government is going to go, because if it doesn't deliver fundamental change, there's going to be a lot of very angry people out there.
Yeah, and as he was pointing out there, if you don't deliver on an actual bold left-wing economic populist agenda that, addresses the concerns of the NHS and addresses the fact that, poverty is skyrocketing in the UK, that you have massive income and wealth inequality where now the top 1% controls 70% of the wealth in the country, or has more wealth than the bottom 70% of the country. If you don't address those fundamental issues plaguing society, then do you think that this coalition that you put together here is going to stick, that this is going to last for the long term? All that this is going to do is, as has happened throughout history, it's going to pave the way for like the Reform Party under Farage to continue to rise and to rise and to rise. If you have a Labour Party that is pushing with an austerity agenda and that is feeding into many of the narratives that are trying to be sold by the right-wing reactionaries, it's just going to aid and abet in their further rise. You know, if you just stick forward with an austerity agenda, you know, centered on like sort of maintaining the status quo when people are suffering, deeply suffering economically and otherwise, then you're not going to win in the long run. This is not a coalition that's going to last for the foreseeable future, right? But, you know, I guess that other MP that was just on the screen there basically just views the change as being, well, now we have a Labour Party MP, right? We have a Labour Party that's in control of the country, and so that's enough. No, you have to get your shit together. You have to push forward with a bold economic platform that materially improves the lives of working class people, or this is not going to work in the long term, and you're going to slowly have the rise of fascists.
Jeremy, can I ask you one other question? What, if you were still the leader of the Labour Party, what would you do to handle what seems to be one of the developing stories this evening, which is that there is something of the rise of the radical right in this country? What, in your view, is the best way for the Labour Party to tackle that?
Good question, Alistair, if I may say so. The rise of the far right across Europe and the titanic struggle that's now going on in France with the second round voting this Sunday is very, very serious. The far right has risen because centre parties have moved to the right to try and mop up the support of the far right. Social democratic and centrist parties have moved a bit to the right with them. And we've had some appalling examples of blaming refugees, blaming migrants, blaming boat people that have made a perilous journey to try and get to a place of safety, as if they're the cause of the social problems of our society. Let's stop blaming minorities and start looking at the fundamental inequalities of our society. The message I put out throughout this campaign in my own constituency of Islington North is I am not getting into that of blaming people who've come, for example, from Bangladesh or somewhere else. I'm instead saying bring people together so we solve our problems together. And I think the rise of the far right is dangerous. You won't beat the far right by conceding the ground to the far right. You have to make a stand against their horrible message of hate and division.
Jeremy, just finally before we lose you, I just want to fill in the viewers on the fact that Johnny Mercer has lost his seat and Therese Coffey, former cabinet minister, has also lost her seat. But I just want to finally ask you also about Labour's position on Israel-Gaza, which has been costly to the party tonight. Jonathan Ashworth has lost his seat. Other people are in trouble over it. What's the lesson?
Well, the lesson is that people are appalled when they see the pictures of the destruction of Gaza. 30,000 and more people have already died in Gaza, and we are complicit because we're supplying weapons to Israel which are used to bomb Gaza. There has to be a ceasefire. There has to be recognition of the state of Palestine. There has to be justice for the Palestinian people. And that is a message that resonates with millions in this country, be they Muslim, Jewish, Christian or of no particular faith. And I think the incoming government needs to reflect that the people that have spoken out about Gaza are not going to go away, are not going to shut up. They're going to carry on speaking out until the killing ends and we see justice for the people of Palestine.
Should Keir Starmer recognise the Palestinian state?
He should recognise the Palestinian state, but the last statement I heard from him appeared to be having so many caveats in it, it's not clear when or how that recognition will come about.
Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much.
I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, listen, I don't know enough about the inner workings of UK politics to get a good understanding of how Israel and Gaza played in these specific elections. I mean, I would think the fact that Jeremy Corbyn, who was very boldly and proudly pro-Palestine and critical of Israel, the fact that he won his seat is maybe saying a little bit of something. But, you know, it's not as if the position of wanting the bloodshed to end, of wanting a ceasefire, of wanting to recognize a Palestinian state, it's not as if those are like deeply unpopular positions. I mean, I know here in the United States, it's been months now that a vast majority of the country has wanted us to cut off weapon shipments to Israel. They've been in favor of a ceasefire. You know, you have a majority of Democrats who think Israel is in the midst of committing a genocide, accurately so. So these are not like deeply unpopular positions, right? If anything, I would think the firmly pro-Israel, no questions asked whatsoever stance is much more unpopular than even an aggressively pro-Palestine stance. But anyways, the point of this is, I think that it's fantastic that Jeremy Corbyn won his seat, even though he had to do it as an independent candidate because the Labour Party is once again trying to screw him. But I'm glad that he's going to be in this position. I'm glad that he's going to be able to be a voice and to be a thorn in the side of Starmer, and hopefully many others will as well. Because again, as he was arguing there, this is not going to be sustainable for the Labour Party. If you're pushing forward with further cuts, with further austerity measures, if you're not addressing the economic crisis that so many millions of people in the UK are, then you're just going to end up losing ground over time to the Conservatives, especially if you're helping to aid and abet in pushing reactionary narratives surrounding migrants that are coming into the country. I mean, it's almost bar for bar, like word for word, what's happening in the United States as well right now with Joe Biden, many other Democrats as well, who are sprinting to the right on immigration, as if this is going to help them electorally. It's like, no, it's not. It's going to destroy your base, your base of supporters who helped to get you elected back in 2020 on a more pro-immigration platform. It's not going to be able to effectively win over the hard right people in the country. And in the meantime, you're displaying an immense amount of cruelty to people who are just trying to come in search of a better life, in many instances from countries that we, the United States, as well as the United Kingdom is another good example of that, and other Western European countries, that we have collectively destroyed throughout the last number of decades through colonization, through the expropriation of resources, through other means as well. So, I mean, again, glad that Jeremy Corbyn won his seat, glad to see him going on the news, unafraid to push back on many of these narratives, and it's going to be interesting because, I'm glad that the Tories are out of power, I'm glad that the Conservatives got effectively fucked by this, but you look more into the data, and it's like this was not a crushing, mandate for somebody like Starmer's positions on these things or policies. It was really just a by default thing. I don't think that, the people of the UK were really excited and motivated to go out and rally behind Keir Starmer. Again, it's just sort of like the opposition was so bad that they won in a landslide by default. And it's a landslide of seats, not a landslide of the total votes, not a landslide even of the vote shares. It was just basically a by default victory. And so if the Labour Party takes the wrong lessons from this and they think that sort of austerity-centered neoliberal centrism is a viable path forward, they're going to be sorely mistaken